hard, proudly touting his latest accomplishment, the confirmation of Judge Brett Kavanaugh. But Ohio Governor John Kasich thinks the way Kavanaugh divided the electorate, will hurt Republicans in November.
People in the country are appalled. That's because it's like, I got to win and you got to lose. People don't feel as though they're being included. They don't feel they're being given a fair shake. People to some degree have become tribal, and our leaders have encouraged it. So what do I think is going to happen in the midterms? I think it's going to be a good year for Democrats.
All right, joining me now is op-ed columnist for the New York Times and co-host of their new podcast, The Argument, Michelle Goldberg, and Republican strategist Evan Siegfried. To both of you, welcome. Let's jump into this because there's a lot to cover here. First of all, Evan, do you agree with that assessment that this is going to be good for the Democrats?
I do, with a caveat. It depends upon if the Democrats are smart enough to stop talking about now Justice Kavanaugh as soon as possible. Because when they talked about it, and with what happened with Dr. Ford and then Michael Avenatti getting in there and the Ramirez story, it fired up the Republican base. And the Republican base was depressed to the point that an antidepressant would not have helped. We were really going to be staying home to the benefit of Democrats in November. So if you move away from Judge Kavanaugh and move toward health care, and is that helping you? You're going to do much better as Democrats in November.
But can they do that, Michelle? Can they do that when you have something like the president who is full on when it comes to these rallies? Mitch McConnell, the president, calling them a mob and all of this. Is it best to just let it go and move on to that, or can they?
Well, I think that, look, we're 1 month out, which in a normal political cycle would be very soon, but in the Trump era is like 6 scandals ago, right? So, I mean, I think it was 1 month ago that Paul Manafort was pleading guilty. And so who knows what we're going to be talking about closer to the midterm. The other thing is that this investigation was done so hastily that inevitably, not because of Democrats, but because of journalists, more and more is going to filter out. You know, all of these people who weren't interviewed by the FBI are eventually going to be interviewed by journalists, and we're going to find out a lot more about, for example, corroborating evidence for Deborah Ramirez's claim. And I think that is just going to, you know, the women who are outraged by this, on the one hand, they could hardly be more energized without combusting.
That's what I want to bring up. How will Democrats, if you're saying Democrats, you got to be silent about this, move on. If you want this to be a good year, if you want November 6th on your side, but then you talk about this enthusiasm gap here, that we saw that even before the vote, even before the confirmation, with the Republicans saying, yeah, we're getting revved up too. Wouldn't that help if the Democrats did the same thing?
Well, first of all, I think we need to acknowledge the elephant in the room. Donald Trump is right. Men are facing tons of false accusations these days. Like, you know, you faked your birth certificate.
You fake
your birth certificate so you could become president. That your father assassinated JFK. Tons of false accusations. So, I mean, Donald Trump is spot on there. But I think that what we've seen Democrats, Democratic women, and independent women, and even women, white women who vote for Republican candidates normally, really upset, fired up, and angry. Why? Because the country's going in the wrong direction. There's too much drama out of Washington. There isn't a lot of bipartisanship and actual good governance. The Congress isn't being a check on the presidency, and the Congress is subservient. They're Reek from Game of Thrones. So I think that the Democratic base is fired up, but you want to do everything you can to diminish the fired upness of the GOP base, and you can do that if you switch back to health care, because independents will be more into that, and you've already got the Democratic base fired up. Now you need to pull in the independents and win as many seats as possible.
I wish I had a thought bubble of what you were thinking when you made that face.
Well, before that took a turn, that was about to get a little bit ugly.
You got to let the joke go fully.
I mean, look, on the one hand, I think, you know, everywhere, I feel like we have this meta conversation about what the Democrats should be doing, and then when you go down to individual races, they are all talking about health care, or they are all talking about the unfairness of the tax bill. You know, the DCCC has a great new ad, and I kind of can't believe I'm saying that. I'm praising an ad by the DCCC that is really powerful about just kind of how unfair and plutocratic the tax bill is. And it's kind of this thing with a lot of things Trump does. The Democrats almost don't have to talk about it because people are already so angry and they're already thinking about it. And it's already, for a lot of women, really affecting what they believe about their place in this country, the prospects for themselves and their daughters. And so it's kind of there ambiently. And, you know, again, so Democrats aren't going to have to be slamming it on the trail all the time.
One thing I would add is that we've seen from new voter registration data from January 1st to mid-September, when we compare that to 2014 and 2010 midterm elections, Democrats are outperforming what they did then. In some states, Colorado, for example, new voter registration is up 233% than it was at this time in 2014.
And can I just say something quickly? I also think Democrats are letting themselves get psyched out a little bit. I mean, probably, yes, conservatives are up in arms. They think this was a terrible injustice done to this man. A lot of those people were going to go vote anyway. And they're, I think, letting themselves get psyched out. This is an incredibly unpopular nominee. More people believe he shouldn't be confirmed than that he should. You know, women, a majority of women were against this confirmation and believe Christine Blasey Ford. And so when Republicans keep saying, like, yeah, we won this one, and maybe they did, I'm sure it's going to help them in states like North Dakota and other places. But overall, let's remember, people don't like Trump, and they do not like this Supreme Court justice or the direction that he's going to take Supreme Court jurisprudence in.
So how long are we going to expect to hear this narrative? We got the president who's making 4 stops in this week alone for these rallies. And you know the words from mocking Dr. Ford to calling Democrats angry mob, all of this stuff we're showing here where he's going to be Iowa, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Kentucky. How long is this narrative of the confirmation, our win, our victory here going to last when we know in Trump time, in politics time, that the world can happen? Anything in the world can happen in the next 4 weeks, Evan.
Last month, the RNC had an internal poll that showed that the majority of Republicans and 57% of strong Trump supporters believe that the polls are fake news and that Democrats don't have the wind at their back and most likely will not take back the House. I think that is bunk. I think it's the hand that, or with the fake news charges, and it's the dog coming back to bite the hand that feeds it. And that could be a real depressant because we can try and string out the high from, yes, we got Kavanaugh confirmed. It would have been better for Republicans politically and strategically had we seen Kavanaugh's nomination go down in flames. Then you would have seen Republicans come out as hard as they could on November 6th. But the president is going to have to do everything he can to rally his base. And every rally he does is he does his greatest hits. And look how that's helped him when he's done rallies in Pennsylvania when he was going against Lamb, or in the Ohio 12th, which only went by a few thousand votes to the Republican in a +12 Republican district. He can't do that all over. And there are more fired up Democrats than there are Republicans.
And when you talk about the greatest hits, we're hearing the same thing over and over again. As we've heard mob quite a bit. Michelle, so with the president falling back and using that terminology because he thinks he'll get the base revved up and supported here. Will they tire? Or is that exactly what's going to get them to November 6th when it comes to that kind of thing?
You know, I think it's very difficult to say, in part because, on the one hand, you know, normal Republican voters are just generally high-frequency voters, right? Republican voters, upper middle class, kind of white, older voters turn out regularly. Then there's the part of the base, the part of the Trump base that kind of didn't vote a lot in the past, that weren't high propensity voters, but that turned out for him. And so those are two different groups of people. And I think he's more aimed at the second one because the first is going to vote no matter what. You know, is this enough to make them vote in midterms for a candidate that maybe they don't know that much about, and to kind of break out of a habit of not voting regularly in midterms? We just don't know. I mean, one of the things that's so difficult in talking about the midterms is that nobody really knows what the electorate is going to look like.
But that gets to another point. Everybody talks about, oh, Donald Trump's poll numbers are so high within the Republican Party, and he's got to turn out the base. But the question is, how big is the Republican Party right now? How big is that base? I've seen evidence that it's actually shrinking. A lot of the new voter registration data we're seeing the number of Republicans on the roll of voters actually shrinking. And we're also saying in Gallup and party self-identification as well. So that's a big outstanding question that in 30 days we'll find out the answer.
Important female, suburban, white, independent, where will they go? Where will they come out of here? And when they hear a testimony from Dr. Ford, and then you have the president there mocking, making fun, angry mob, and saying, you know what, you just got the wrong person. So where we'll see that come into play and how that'll come, we'll all watch, right?
Yeah.
Thank you for being with us, Michelle and Evan. Always great to have you with us. Thank you. All right, Americans will feel the impact of a conservative Supreme Court this week. Still ahead, 3 cases Brett Kavanaugh that he'll be taking on. But first, Saturday Night Live gave their take on the GOP celebration after that historic vote. Let's watch this.
Lindsay, walk us through the final confirmation.
Well, oh man, well, for a while we thought it was going to be, and we were going to have to go with our closer, Mike Pence. He was going to jog into Metallica's Enter the Sandman and start throwing votes at 100 miles an hour. But thank the male Lord, that was not